Hello, beauties. Welcome to Moms Unboxed, a podcast where I unbox with you the how-tos, tips, and tricks to empower women to upgrade relationships, intimacy, and parenting. I'm your host, Melanie Caroline, a multi-dimensional woman, life coach, lover, and mom who's made a lot of fucking mistakes. If you want to live a sensual and liberated life, you've come to the right space. Don't forget to follow Moms Unboxed because you don't want to miss an episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Moms Unboxed. How y'all doing this week? I want to hear from you. Connect with me at Moms Unboxed Podcast on Instagram. Woo! We are getting to the holidays. It is Thanksgiving week, and I'm wishing you and yours a happy Thanksgiving if you celebrate it. If you don't, just have a bomb-ass week. Today we are talking about triggers and how the Four Foundations of Mindfulness will completely shift how you heal. Let's say your partner comes home late and you just get really upset and you start attacking, asking a bunch of questions. Why was your partner late? What were they doing? And you have had a previous relationship where you were cheated on. And so coming home late, looking like they're keeping their messages secret, they changed their password on their phone, they're hugging a woman. Those all are things that could be triggering for you. Or let's say your partner interrupts you, and that could be triggering for you because you grew up with parents who made you feel unseen and unheard and unvalued, and they constantly interrupted you, or they told you things like you are to be seen and not heard, or perhaps always having to do things on your own can be triggering because you literally raised yourself as a teenager, or maybe your child yells at you and tells you no all the time. And that could also be triggering because it's triggering memories of when you were with your first love who constantly disrespected you. I recently saw an Instagram reel where a child was having a lot of emotions and the child flipped his head back, which happens to all of us. And the child hit the mom in the face. And the mom, literally the reel is about not being triggered, but being able to process that trigger and not react to the child, and being able to hold space for the child to have their emotions. There are all types of ways in which we are triggered, and our emotional brain reacts in milliseconds versus our conscious mind, which takes a little bit longer to process the trigger, which is why when you are triggered, you feel the emotions in your body. You feel the anger boiling underneath your skin. You feel the sadness swelling in your eyes as your tears starts sliding down your face. You feel the frustration as you clench your fist. You start gnawing on the inside of your cheeks. You start feeling your jaw clenching. There are many ways in which our triggers present themselves within our body. And that is the first foundation of mindfulness, is awareness of the physical self. And when we begin developing our meditation and mindfulness practice, that is one of the first things that you're going to start being more aware of, is the emotions, sensations, and feelings that are in the body. And it's a miraculous thing when we can become more aware of our body, because then we start noticing, okay, I am being triggered right now. And I know this because I feel an aching in my chest, or I feel my throat is starting to close, or I'm starting to grind my teeth. I feel the anger, frustration arising within me. And you're going to notice the sensations in your body before you begin to notice them within the mind. So it's very important that we understand what sensations are we carrying in our body. Even when we're not triggered, what does it feel like for you to be absolutely hungry and then you realize you haven't eaten all day? Or what does it feel like in your body when your partner kisses you? What does it feel like in your body when your child comes up and holds your hand and tells you that they love you? It's not only the triggering sensations that we want to be mindful of, but it's also the ones that bring us joy and happiness. We also have to pay attention to those as well. And when we become more aware of our body and its sensations, it calls us to respond to them. If you notice by midday that your stomach is grumbling and you're absolutely hungry, that gives you an opportunity to respond to it and eat and fulfill your body's needs. Same with when we're triggered. If you notice that someone cutting you off in traffic is triggering you to the point where you're yelling at them, start investigating. What does that feel like in your body? Why do you get so viscerally angry with someone else who's cutting you off? And it's oftentimes not the trigger itself that creates the emotions. It is the memory and the limiting belief, the narrative and story that is tied to the trigger. The trigger is simply an open doorway. It allows us to really investigate what is happening internally. Something you probably don't know is that when we are in constant survival mode, our amygdala, the part of the brain that responds to stress and like absolutely worry, right? It actually grows in size. So if you are a woman who has lived in survival mode most of her life, your amygdala is going to be bigger in size than someone who has had the ability to process their stress. The person that hasn't been in survival mode, who has lived a healthy, balanced life, who has felt supported. But for a person like me, and perhaps you, who has grown up with a mother who is addicted to drugs, or who has had numerous partners and you continuously moved in order to survive, the person that's changed schools multiple times in their childhood, who was always the new kid, who was physically abused, sexually abused, who lived a lot of their life in trauma, your amygdala is going to be quicker to respond to things that are triggering you, because it basically sends out hormones and signals that says, hey, we're in a life-threatening situation, fire off. And then your body goes into this stress response state and your nervous system becomes dysregulated. And that's when we start reacting to the cause of stress. Even if the cause of stress is your child drops their cereal bowl and it clashes to the floor, that automatically might make you feel stressed, because subconsciously it's reminding you of when your mom used to throw plates at the cupboards because she was so erratic and stressed out. It's the simplest things that could be the trigger. And it's not your fault that you might be reacting to it, that you might be reacting to your body's response. That is the way you've learned to cope. And this is why it's so important to recognize our body's sensations so that when you are triggered, you can know, oh, hey, I'm being triggered right now. What is the trigger and why am I feeling so triggered? And it takes meditation and mindfulness. It takes softening and dropping into the body for you to be able to have that ability to process the trigger. We can't process and understand the inner happenings of our body when we are in a reactionary state. Think about when you're yelling or you're frustrated, or you might be the one throwing something, screaming in a pillow. It's hard for us to process in that state. So that's why it's so important to start the meditation and mindfulness practices while you're not in a state of stress or you're triggered. You want to practice meditation and mindfulness when you're feeling like you have the space and the time. When you first wake up in the morning is a really good time to just sit for 5 minutes and do a body scan. What is happening internally? Right before you go to bed, think about what your body is experiencing within. What are the aches and the tensions that you might be experiencing? Are you having, fluttering going on in your belly? Are you excited? And what does that feel like? Are you feeling sad? And where does the sadness live inside of your body? So when we are able to understand our internal landscape when we're not being triggered, this is going to help us when we are triggered. And I remember at the beginning of my healing journey where I was constantly in survival mode. I was in a toxic relationship and I was constantly catering to this person. And I was in so much turmoil all the time. I was constantly unhappy, always crying, and I was very disconnected with myself. And I began meditating. I needed to do something for myself. I needed an answer. I advocate so much that meditation, it absolutely fucking works. And if you're wanting quick results, like obviously meditating is not a one-time, two-time thing. It's a continuous practice that evolves over your life, and you get more in depth in yourself, not just in your body, but also your emotions and feelings, your thoughts and the events that can be triggering. It like shines a spotlight on all of you. And when I was taking meditation-based stress relief, I really started to understand where my unhappiness lied within my body, in my heart, in my soul, and how I was contributing to my own suffering. And this is what meditation does for you. It allows you to see yourself from a compassionate lens. It allows you to see where you need to take accountability for your own unhappiness and suffering. And so when you're triggered, it allows you the space to respond to the trigger. It helps you recognize where you're reacting. And it's not unreasonable for you to overreact, as kind of what happens when we're in a state of survival mode. So you also get to recognize that too. When your partner forgets to take out the garbage like you asked twice already, and then you just start yelling because you're triggered because it's causing you to feel like you're disrespected. Instead of yelling at your partner, it allows you to understand where the trigger is coming from, and you get to explain that to your partner. Perhaps growing up, you felt misunderstood and disrespected and unheard because when you asked for help with your homework, they'd say, yeah, I'll help you, but then they never did. And it made you feel devalued. So when we understand our trigger more and it becomes enlightening, truly, it helps you really understand the depths of yourself so that you can improve your communication, so that you can understand the root cause and the memory and the stories and beliefs that are intertwined with your trauma and the trigger. You get to unravel that so that you can understand yourself on a deeper level. And that's why it's important to first start with awareness of the physical self, of the body, understanding what the sensations are and how those can be expressed is an important part of your self-discovery. The second foundation of mindfulness is awareness of your emotions and feelings. And this is often tied with our body and its sensations. When you feel your throat is closing, when you're feeling unheard, what emotions are living in your throat? Disappointment, anger, shame, guilt. And we get to understand the emotions that are tied with the trigger, that are creating this suffocating feeling. And it is with our emotions that we get to dive a bit deeper. If you're feeling shame around yourself, where did it originate? Is it a mistake that you made in your early adulthood? Perhaps you're someone who is similar to me that made some mistakes as a young mom, and you feel the shame around that because that's time you can't get back with your children. So when your teenager doesn't want to spend time with you, it brings up that shame. Like, I didn't get to have time with you when you were younger. Now, when you're older, you don't want to spend time with me now. And that could be extremely triggering. That could create a lot of sadness and grief to arise. And it's important for you to recognize that. It's not to blame the teen or blame your partner or your parents for the reason why you feel the shame or the anger or the grief. It's up to us to heal that part of ourselves, to understand the emotions that are living inside of our body. And that's why I've created a beautiful technique called Letters with Emotions. And I will sit and meditate around an emotion that I'm experiencing. And shame certainly comes up for me a bit because I was that mom who made shitty mistakes when her kids were younger. I was very focused on a fucking man baby who is a alcoholic who continuously threatened to commit suicide if I left his side. And I lost so much time with my children because of that. And I still live with that shame, but I don't allow the shame to trigger me. I notice the shame with tenderness and I soften into it. I understand it. I allow it to be seen. And sometimes that's all we need in order to soften a trigger, is noticing the emotion that arises. And so next time you're feeling triggered, I want you to try this. When you're feeling triggered by something, I want you to first recognize that you're being triggered. And then I want you to dive deeper into your body and ask yourself, where is the trigger lying within the body and what emotion is tied to the trigger? Is it anger? And we'll use anger as an example, but obviously there's an array of emotions. And when we're feeling angry and we recognize it's tied to the trigger, I just want you to place a hand on the part of your body where you feel the anger. And I'll use the throat as an example. So I've got my hand on my throat, and I'm simply just going to bring my awareness to the anger and simply speak to the anger. I see you, anger. I feel you. I acknowledge your presence. I'm beginning to understand why you are present in my throat. And I recognize that when I was growing up, I felt like I was unheard. I could never speak. I was always interrupted. And I see now that when I'm interrupted by a coworker, a family member, my children, and my partner, this brings you anger to my throat. And I see that. And I want to give you permission to soften. I want to give you permission to release. And then maybe you'll take a couple breaths here, inhaling and exhaling. And just giving anger the opportunity to be released. And notice when you speak to anger, how it softens by just naming it for what it is, just recognizing it. Noticing its presence in your body is sometimes all we need to just bring more peace and patience into that moment of when we are triggered. And when we have that ability to become aware of our body, to bring our awareness to the emotions and feelings that we're experiencing, this gives us an opportunity to understand where the trigger really has originated. And that brings us to our third foundation of mindfulness, awareness of our thoughts. And becoming aware of our thoughts takes time, patience, and practice. Because when we are constantly in doing mode, it is harder for us to be consciously aware of the stories that are playing in our minds, the thoughts that we're having. We are always living in the external, right? Looking for external validation, talking to people, interacting with our environment and the world around us, with our children, with our partner. And to become aware of the mind, we really have to set time aside to tap in to the mind. What is it you're thinking? What stories and narratives are playing in your head when you are triggered? And we can't bring our awareness or a focus to this when we are in reaction mode. And that is why I constantly preach that meditation allows us the space and time to really focus and become aware of our mind and the memories that are arising when we are triggered. I'm going to give you a really perfect example. My partner and I were having a very difficult conversation about what our relationship looks like outside of us. And we were having this conversation. I brought up, if I'm sick, if I'm truly ill, would us being and looking for people outside of ourselves continue? And my partner and I were going back and forth on this conversation, and it felt like he just was not seeing my perspective, my point of view. And I was getting viscerally angry, like really, really angry that I was feeling misunderstood. I wasn't feeling heard. I was feeling worried that him and his desires would take precedence over my medical needs and my need for support and care, if that's what it came down to. And I realized in a moment of pause where this fear was coming from, why I was feeling so viscerally angry that he was going to choose himself over me and our relationship. And it was because when my stepmother was diagnosed with cancer and going through chemo and radiation, puking in the toilet, absolutely feeling awful, my dad chose to go rafting and do his hobbies before taking care of her and being with her. He did not understand why she could no longer go camping or go rafting and exert all this physical energy to be with him while he was doing his hobbies. And she was fucking sick. Really, really sick. And it created such turmoil in their relationship that they ended up separating rooms. And I witnessed a lot of this. And I thought it was fucking awful how selfish my dad could be. And I don't want to be with a man who will ever choose his fucking hobbies over taking care of me if I ended up that ill. And in the moment, in the heat of the conversation, I was literally like, if we can't get on the same fucking page about this, there is no fucking need for us to be together, because I don't want to spend the rest of my life with someone for me to end up ill, for him to be choosing his own hobbies over taking care of me. And I understand that everyone needs to take care of themselves. And, you know, it's not unrealistic to think he might want to go hang out with his friends or go do something for himself to take care of himself. But there's a difference between that and making me feel like shit because I can't participate, or leaving me in bed alone while I jump from bed and the toilet to go vomit because I'm going through chemo and radiation so that I can get better. And there's just certain boundaries and values that I will not sacrifice for someone else. I would rather be single than be with someone who is that selfish. And I didn't realize in that moment of this heated conversation as to why I was getting so viscerally angry until I was able to be present with the trigger, present within my body and my emotions. And the awareness of thoughts started arising. Like, I asked myself, where is this coming from? Why am I so angry about this? And I realized it was because of those memories that I had. They were very present within me, witnessing my stepmother so ill and my dad so angry because she couldn't live her life like they did when they first met. So I want you to think about, when you are feeling triggered, what memories are attached to the trigger? Why are you getting so upset and angry or sad or living in your grief? What is there for you? And can you ask that part of you to arise so that you can discover more for yourself what needs to be healed around your trigger? What needs to be held with compassion? What needs to be forgiven? And it is when we do this work that we really start healing. And as we begin to heal those things and understand those parts of us, you'll notice that when you are triggered, it's A, it's not going to cause the visceral reaction that you may have. And B, you're going to become aware of it. And so when you are triggered, you might not have any reaction at all. You might simply notice and state, oh, I'm feeling a little angry. I notice that that trigger is still present within. And there might be a time where that trigger is no longer because you've done the inner healing to dissolve it. The fourth foundation of mindfulness is awareness of events. And I like to always add awareness of events, circumstances, and people, because all those things can be triggering too. For an example, if you had an addiction in your previous past, or your parents had an addiction to alcohol or drugs, and you notice when you walk down the alcohol aisle and you see Bud Light, my mom's favorite, it could be triggering for you because you recognize, oh, my dad used to drink that, or my mom used to drink that. And when they used to drink, they used to be angry, and I'd get punished for the stupidest shit. Or when you see cigarettes and you notice it triggers you because your uncle used to smoke and your uncle passed away from lung cancer. There's many, many reasons for an event, a circumstance, even a location to be triggering. I've known people who will literally avoid cities because it reminded them of a toxic relationship that they used to have. And it takes time for us to become aware of that trigger and understand where it's coming from, and to send that part of you love and compassion and healing so that you can go back into that city, so that you can go down the alcohol aisle, so that you can see a pack of cigarettes without feeling so much grief. So you see, the four foundations of mindfulness is absolutely essential to your healing process. And it is through our practice of meditation and mindfulness where we get to learn and embody the four foundations of mindfulness. We get to understand our inner landscape more in depth, because healing continuously has layers upon layers upon layers. Even when we think we've fully healed something else will trigger us. Another story, another memory will arise, and we find ourselves healing again where we thought perhaps we were kind of complete with the healing. And the healing doesn't look the same necessarily every single time. You know, when I was going through my divorce, I was crying nearly every day. I joke on the podcast, you know, how I spent the first year drinking wine, taking baths, and crying. And it was constantly another layer. And even, you know, almost 3 years later from my separation, I'll find myself thinking about something else around my marriage and processing that. And it doesn't look like wine and baths anymore and tears. It just looks like a simple noticing and softening into that part of my body that feels the sadness. And it might be that case for you with something you're healing. And you get to bring your tenderness and love into that part of you that notices when the trigger is there, when the person is in front of you, or you drive through the city where your first love and you fell in love and ended up breaking up. Or, you know, you pass the gravesite where your brother is buried and it brings up memories for you. And sometimes it doesn't mean that you're screaming and crying and blaming yourself. It just means, oh, you notice that there is something within that is still there, waiting for a hug, waiting to be loved, waiting to be acknowledged. And you get to do that within your healing journey and your self-discovery journey. If you are looking for someone to support you and hold you in a space of love and tenderness, connect with me at Moms Unboxed podcast on Instagram. Message me. I would love to hold a space for you and give you a space for someone to listen, for someone who understands what it is like to heal and to transform and evolve into a greater version of yourself. I love you, mamas. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you feel empowered to practice these 4 foundations of mindfulness, I highly encourage you, as it will be absolutely transformative to your healing practice. I love you, and don't forget to live a liberated, sensual, and unboxed life. Thank you again for listening to Moms Unbox. Please don't forget to share this episode with all your mommy friends and follow me on Instagram at Moms Unbox Podcast. Tune in next Thursday for another juicy episode. Until the next time, sunshine.